Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Vision of Discovery Educator Workshop. My name is Shari Asplund, and I'm at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. We've got workshops going on simultaneously in 3 other locations, so I want to welcome our friends and colleagues at the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry in Portland, our friends and colleagues at the Applied Physics Lab in Laurel, Maryland, and those at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. I also want to welcome all the folks who are watching on our webinar broadcast, and say hi to my mom, who might be watching on my brother's iPad. Hi, Mom, in Omaha. So we've got a really, really fun workshop for you planned today. As you can see, it's about science inspiring art and art inspiring science. There's more and more interest in art and science and music all working together to really engage children, both because it's fun, it's multidisciplinary, it reaches different intelligences, also because it makes a lot of sense. There's a lot that goes together between art and science. So that's what we're really happy to be focusing on today. So just to give you a little bit about a background, people have heard that the space shuttle is over, and some people think that means NASA's gone. Well, we're still here, folks. We're not gone. NASA has many other areas of exploration besides the space shuttle. Of course, there's budget issues. There's always budget issues. But we work in an area called the NASA Science Mission Directorate. NASA Science studies the Earth to meet the challenges of climate and environmental change. NASA studies heliophysics to understand the sun and its interactions with the Earth and the solar system. And NASA studies astrophysics to discover how the universe began, how it evolved, how it works today, and to search for Earth-sized planets around other stars. And we also explore the planets. We're looking to the solar system, seeking answers to these age-old questions. Where did we come from? Where are we going? And are we alone? Like little CSI detectives, only ours are celestial science investigators, our missions search for clues hidden in the expanse of the solar system to learn about the origin and the evolution, to understand how we got here. We can look at our closest neighbors. Venus has a runaway greenhouse effect. Its atmosphere is poisonous. Could that be the fate of our Earth? If we know more about Venus, we can better protect ourselves for the future. And look at Mars. Evidence now has told us that Mars definitely had running water at some point. What happened on Mars? Something probably not too good. Could that be in store for Earth? We don't know. So the more we can learn, it definitely makes sense for us to try to find out to help protect our own planet. And we look to the future. We want to understand potential hazards to humans from impacts from asteroids or comets. The poor old dinosaurs didn't have the technology to know that an asteroid was coming at them, but we do. So we might as well use it. And we need to learn much more about these asteroids and their structure to protect our planet in the future. And we also want to ensure the safety of future human explorers. And then the are we alone? Does life exist outside of Earth? Was there ever life in the past on any of the other planets or even their moons? Where did the building blocks of life come from? So the 2 NASA missions of solar system exploration programs that I work for and that are sponsoring this workshop today are called the Discovery Program and the New Frontiers Program. Discovery was started in 1992. It's celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. It's been extremely successful. These are missions that are lower cost, and they're trying to answer those 3 fundamental questions by sending robotic spacecraft to explore the planets, our moon, maybe other moons, asteroids, and comets. It was a radical approach at the time for NASA in 1992, but the radical approach has been a great success. We've gotten groundbreaking science with images, data, and samples returned here to Earth that are revolutionizing perceptions and challenging long-held theories. These missions are all proposed by a scientist, someone with an idea, someone with questions, who's curious about the many mysteries of our solar system, and who puts together a team of many, many people and designs a space mission that will basically add another piece of knowledge to help solve our cosmic puzzle. Each mission requires literally hundreds of people to formulate the questions, to build the machines, to program the computers, and to get the mission launched into space. These are the 16 Discovery and New Frontiers missions that have been selected by NASA so far since 1992. We have too many for me to actually spend time going over all of them for you, so I'm just going to talk about a few of our comet and planetary missions, or I'm sorry, our asteroid and planetary missions. Our first up-close look at an asteroid was the NEAR mission. It was the first to launch in the Discovery program in 1996, and it became the first spacecraft ever to orbit an odd-shaped asteroid. It spent a full year in orbit of asteroid Eros, and then it actually did a soft landing on the surface, and that picture on the bottom right is what it saw as it got very close to touching down. It returned over 160,000 detailed images of Eros, and it showed that it was a cracked but solid rock, disproving theories before that asteroids were either made of solid iron or just rubble piles. That's just one of the many, many findings, and of course, with so many photos, they're still being analyzed. The next mission to an asteroid is called Dawn, and you're going to hear much more about Dawn later on. It's now in orbit around asteroid Vesta, and will move on to go into orbit around asteroid dwarf planet Ceres later on to provide a better understanding of the conditions and processes at the beginning of the solar system. I've given you just some of the amazing photos that we've been getting back, including the one on the lower right, shows a mountain that they found on Vesta that's so far the highest mountain we've ever seen in the solar system. It's about 13 miles above the surrounding surface area. So the mission of Dawn is kind of building on what we learned on the NEAR mission, adding more questions, trying to find answers to some that we didn't get answered. A third asteroid mission is called OSIRIS-REX. It's still being built. It's planned for a 2016 launch. It's actually going to grab a sample of dirt from an asteroid and bring it back here to Earth. And it's going to do that without landing. That arm that you see on the bottom left is going to reach down, grab a hunk of dirt, and bring it back here to Earth. Your students could be among those that will be analyzing these pristine samples from an asteroid in the 2023 timeframe. Something for them to look forward to. Mars Pathfinder was the first Discovery mission actually selected for the program, and it was the first rover to set down on the surface of Mars. It explored the surface, it conducted science and technology experiments, it analyzed rocks, it returned thousands of images. And you see the comparison picture, the little cute one in the center, about the size of a microwave oven. That was the Sojourner rover that landed on the 4th of July in 1997. To its left is a model of the Spirit and Opportunity rovers that have now been on the surface of Mars since 2004, about the size of a small golf cart. And the one on the far right is the Curiosity rover, the one that's on its way to Mars now, about the size of a small car. So they've really grown up since little Sojourner, but she led the way. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that rover in a bit. Hot days and cold nights at Mercury. The Messenger mission entered into orbit around Mercury just about a year ago when we had our workshop last year. It's the first spacecraft ever to orbit the planet closest to the sun, and we're getting some amazing images back, and you're going to hear a lot more about Messenger later on as well. New Horizons, still chugging along on its way to Pluto. It launched in 2006, and it won't get there until 2015. It's a long way out to Pluto. But it'll be the first mission ever to get a close-up look. The image I've given you on the bottom right is the best image we have so far of what Pluto looks like. That's from the Hubble Space Telescope. Doesn't really give us any details at all. This is a size comparison, so you can see how Pluto compares with our moon, with Mars and the Earth. It's pretty small. It's a whole new class of planet. It's an icy dwarf, and there's probably hundreds of ice dwarf planets. We haven't been up close to one yet. So scientists are extremely anxious to get there, to see what it looks like, to see how they've formed, evolved, and how they fit in with the other planetary objects. So the technology. None of these missions could happen without new technologies. The challenges common to all of them are immense distances that they have to cover, long flight times to get where they're going, really extreme hot and cold environments, stringent limitations on their mass and power. The bigger and more expensive they are, the less likely they're going to be approved, so they go for new technologies so that they have a better chance of actually flying. And the technology advances benefit all of the missions. They also benefit all of us. NASA's technological developments are called spin-offs, when industry takes one and applies it to commercial products. At home, in your car, in your doctor's office, out on the sports field, pretty much everywhere you go, you're somehow using and taking advantage of technology that was developed for the space program. Cordless power tools were developed for the Apollo program, water purification systems, kidney dialysis, infrared cameras, rescue tools, literally hundreds and hundreds of medical-related spin-offs. Since 1976, over 1,300 technologies have been turned over to industry and applied it to commercial products. So investing in NASA really is a dividend that pays off for all of us. That half a cent that is pretty much the equivalent of what every man, woman, and child pays each year that goes to NASA really has paid us huge dividends over time. So in addition to the technology making these great missions happen, it's really the people, the ordinary people who are doing some very extraordinary things. These space missions are telling us more than we've ever known before about the solar system because of the people behind the machines. The brilliant scientists who come up with the questions, the talented technologists and the exceptional engineers who build the spacecraft and make it happen, and the clever mathematicians who come up with those amazing trajectories and get us there in the first place. I want to just focus on a couple of the people who have been involved with these missions, and just to give you a little bit of the story behind the people. Alan Stern, he is the principal investigator or the chief scientist on the New Horizons mission, the one that's on its way to Pluto. You can see from his credentials that I've given you, he's got degrees both in science and engineering, which is kind of unusual. The scientists don't often talk to the engineers. They live in different worlds. We kind of think of them as one big group of people who all know the same stuff, but they're really not. The scientists live in their world, and the engineers live in theirs. And for these missions to work, they have to communicate. And Alan is a great example of someone who loves both. I interviewed Alan shortly before his mission was getting ready to launch in 2006. And it was fascinating to talk to him. Alan was born in 1957, and he knew from the time that he was only 7 or 8 years old that he wanted to be a scientist. He wanted to be involved especially in space science. He grew up in New Orleans. No one in his family was particularly technical, but he doesn't remember ever wanting to be anything other than an astronomer or an astronaut. When he was in about 3rd or 4th grade, he told me his class had a field trip to NASA's Michaud Assembly Facility in New Orleans. It's where Boeing in the 1960s was building the first stage of the huge Saturn rocket that would carry the Apollo astronauts to the moon. The first stage alone is 139 feet high and 33 feet in diameter. This blew Alan away as a little kid. He said that was the coolest field trip he could have ever imagined. He couldn't believe they got to do something so amazing. His family moved to Dallas not long after that. He was in about the 6th grade. He told me he really loved science, he liked to read, but he was kind of a couch potato. He didn't do sports, but he was really, really interested in technical stuff, even as a young kid. Things like trajectories, things that most kids wouldn't really give much thought to. He read a lot, and he tried to figure out the math. He was really interested in spacecraft designs, so he actually wrote to the folks at the Johnson Space Center in Public Affairs, and they'd send him brochures, the kind that they sent to most kids. What do the astronauts eat? How do they go to the bathroom? Alan said, I'm not interested in that. I want to see the technical manuals. I want to see the checklists. And they told him, well, they don't just give that to anybody. They really only give that to accredited press. And he said, well, what does that mean? He said, people who write for magazines or people who write a book. And he thought, well, I can do that. So Alan, at about age 13, sat down and wrote a book. It was about 50 pages, and it was called Unmanned Spacecraft, An Inside View, and it was about a robotic mission to a comet. His grandfather owned a business, and so his grandfather's secretary typed up this 50-page book for him with 3 carbon copies. When he finished it, he sent one of the carbon copies off to his person at the Johnson Space Center and said, now can I get my manuals? He said 2 weeks later, a box about 4 feet high arrived at their porch, loaded with manuals. He couldn't believe it. He started reading. He said he couldn't go more than about 10 minutes because it gave him a headache. But he was thrilled, and he said he kept those for years and years, and he pored over them, and they continued to inspire him. And it was really funny because he said he hadn't thought of that for years before I started probing about his childhood. And he said, I bet I still have a copy of that. So Alan went on to study at the University of Texas. He actually did a thesis that involved Pluto. You can see the quote at the bottom. In 1989, he was here at JPL, taking a class at Caltech, got together with a group and said, let's get together a mission for Pluto. Well, he became the principal investigator of that mission, doing many other things along the way. He's an instrument-rated pilot. He's flew on an F-18 jet fighter doing research. He was a finalist to be a space shuttle astronaut. That didn't work out, but he's a great guy, and it just shows you, what your kids might be capable of when they have those kind of weird little ideas when they're young. The other person I want to tell you about is Donna Shirley. She followed her dream, and she literally made history. Donna was the manager of JPL's Mars exploration program during that Mars Pathfinder mission in 1997 with the little rover. She led the team, and she led the battle to get that first little micro rover on the red planet. And you can see Donna's background. She has degrees in both writing and engineering, which means she's a very good communicator, and that's another super important quality. In addition to being a great engineer, to work at a place like this, you really have to be able to communicate, both with the scientists, with the people that you're trying to get funding from. So her background in communication was extremely important. She's written an autobiography called Managing Martians that details her climb from a socially awkward childhood in Oklahoma to the heights of the testosterone-dominated world of space engineers that she found here at JPL. She grew up as a tomboy. She dodged home economics. She took technical drawing. She built model airplanes. She dreamed of adventure. She read a lot of science fiction, and she became fascinated by Mars at age 10. She read an article about space pioneer Wernher von Braun, and it was always in the back of her mind. She also took flying lessons as a teenager. She showed up at the University of Oklahoma, and she went to enroll in aeronautical engineering. The advisor said, girls can't be engineers. Donna said, oh, yes, I can. And she was. In 1966, with her pilot's license, her degrees in writing and aerospace engineering, she came here to JPL. They offered her a job. It was the lowest paying offer that she got, but she jumped at it. And apparently she was the only woman with an engineering degree at that time among 2,000 men. Over the years, she worked on a couple dozen planetary projects. Her greatest strengths were her people skills, her communicating and managing skills. She says she wasn't a great hardware or software engineer, but she could always recognize people who were. In 1992, she was assigned to lead the development of that small little rover. NASA had wanted to build a $1 billion rover the size of a truck to send to Mars. And Congress said, we're not giving you the money. You've got to do things smaller, faster, less expensive. And that was really the birth of the Discovery program at that time. So Donna picked people for her rover team that she knew could do the job. She knew they were flexible and could work as a team, not in the usual kind of hierarchy that had been the norm here. But even then, the rover almost didn't get onto the mission. The manager was prepared to land a craft on the surface of Mars. He didn't want a rover. That would just add complications. It would add to the risk. He really wanted no part of it. Donna was determined. And gee, by 1994, she was heading the entire Mars exploration program. So the rover got on. So the mission launched, and it was set to land on the 4th of July, 1997. No one really knew what was going to happen. It was a first. It was really kind of touch and go for a while, but it was a fabulous success. It captivated people around the world. 4 days after the landing, there were 47 million hits on the website, and that was kind of a watershed moment for the internet. Nothing like that had ever happened before. Donna was named Woman of the Year by both Glamour and Ms. Magazine. She was photographed by Annie Leibovitz for Vanity Fair. She entered worlds she had no idea about. She won the National Space Society's Wernher von Braun Award, which was very fitting for her. But she retired a year or so later. She got kind of tired of all the politics and the nonsense, and she had really accomplished her main goal. So she went on to become the assistant dean at the university that had told her girls can't be engineers. She also directed the Science Fiction Museum Hall of Fame in Seattle and is currently the president of an organization she calls Managing Creativity. So Donna is just another really great example of of the people here who work on these missions. And I'm sure just like all of your students and all of you, you've got great stories, great potential, and just need help to get them all realized. So that's it. You can learn more on our websites. And I'm now going to send this over to the Applied Physics Lab, where Julie Edmonds will be introducing our next speaker.